Part 1. The rules are nailed to the door. The forest was already whispering by the time I arrived at Camp Ashwood. The long gravel road behind me crackled beneath the tires of the rusty shuttle van. I had been watching the trees the entire drive, crooked silhouettes that bent toward the road as if eavesdropping. Now, as I stepped out onto the damp earth, the scent of pine needles and old wood filled my lungs. A storm had passed through earlier, leaving everything slick and quiet. The camp looked abandoned, except for one dimly lit cabin at the far end of the lot. The others sat in eerie silence, windows boarded or broken, paint peeled like dead skin. Cabin 13, the driver muttered without looking at me. Don't stray after midnight. Read the rules. That's all I'll say. Then he drove off, leaving me alone with my duffel bag and a growing sense of dread. I trudged toward the only lit building, Cabin 13. The door creaked open on its own before I could knock. The inside was surprisingly clean. A single cot, a small table, and a wood stove still faintly warm. There was no one inside, but something else caught my eye. Nailed to the back of the door with a rusted railroad spike was a yellowing sheet of paper, edges curled like it had been there for years. Rules for Cabin 13. Follow them if you want to survive the night. 1. Lock the door by 11:59 p.m. Don't open it again until sunrise. 2. If you hear screaming from the woods, cover your ears. It's not someone who needs help. 3. Do not look at the figure in the mirror after midnight. It will remember you. 4. The radio on the shelf will turn on at 3:13 a.m. Let it play until it stops. Don't touch it. 5. If someone knocks after 2 a.m. and says they're from camp maintenance, hide under the bed and don't breathe. There were 2 more rules, but the bottom half of the page had been torn off. A wave of unease rolled over me. I had signed up for a 3-night wilderness retreat with no phone service, no electronics, and, supposedly, a deep reset from the chaos of modern life. What I had not expected was a cursed cabin, creepy rules, and the vague sense that something was watching from the tree line. I sat on the bed, reading the rules again, and then, skrink, the sound of something scraping across the roof. I looked up. It was just the wind, right? The clock ticked toward 11:58. I locked the door. Then I turned back to the mirror above the dresser and noticed something was already staring at me from inside it. Part 2. The mirror knows your name. The reflection didn't match my movements. I blinked. The thing in the mirror blinked half a second later. It looked like me, same messy hair, same hoodie, but its smile was off. Too wide, too eager. I took a step back. The reflection didn't move. A drop of cold sweat trailed down my neck. I remembered rule number 3. Do not look at the figure in the mirror after midnight. It will remember you. I looked at the clock on the wall. 12:03 a.m. Shit. I tore my gaze away and back toward the cot. The mirror stayed still, but out of the corner of my eye, the reflection began to tilt its head. Slowly, deliberately. I yanked the scratchy blanket over the mirror. The room instantly felt colder. I sat in the corner, knees pulled tight, heart pounding against my ribs. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but now it had a tone, like whispering. like something was talking through the wind, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. The clock ticked toward 2 a.m. That was when rule number 5 came into play. If someone knocks after 2 a.m. and says they're from camp maintenance, hide under the bed and don't breathe. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to tell time anymore. My watch had frozen at 11:59. The wall clock had begun to tick backward. Then, 3 soft knocks at the door. My breath caught in my throat. "Camp maintenance," a voice said, calm and cheerful. Too cheerful. Just a routine check-in. I scrambled to the bed, squeezing under it just as the doorknob began to turn. I had locked the door. I knew I had. The door creaked open anyway. Heavy boots stepped inside. I saw them through the narrow gap between the floorboards and the bed frame. Mud-caked, soaked, the figure walked slowly across the room, leaving a trail of black sludge. It paused at the foot of the bed. "Come out now," the voice crooned. "No need to be afraid." I didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like hours, the boots turned and left. The door creaked closed behind them and locked itself with a loud click. I waited until the first faint glow of morning seeped through the cracks in the walls. Then I crawled out, shaking. The blanket had fallen from the mirror. The reflection was gone, but smeared across the glass in something dark and dripping were 5 words. "You broke rule number 3. Part 3. The girl in the yellow raincoat. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after the message on the mirror. Not after the camp maintenance man who walked in without ever opening the lock. I spent most of the morning pacing the cabin, trying to convince myself to leave. But rule number 1 burned in my brain. Do not leave cabin 13 before sunrise or after sunset. It was nearly 8 a.m. now. I could have bolted, but some part of me knew that whatever was out there might be worse than what was inside. At exactly 8:30, the phone rang. It hadn't worked since I got here. It wasn't even plugged in. I stared at it, heart thudding. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then it stopped. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, a knock came from the window. I turned and froze. There was a girl standing out there, maybe 13 or 14, pale, expressionless, drenched in rainwater, though the sky was clear. Her long black hair stuck to her face, and her bright yellow raincoat looked decades old, torn at the sleeves, stained at the hem. She pressed her hand against the glass. Then her lips moved. "Let me in." I nearly reached for the window latch. Almost forgot rule number 4. If a child in a yellow raincoat knocks at the window, do not engage. She is not lost. She is not a child. I stepped back slowly. She smiled, and then she vanished. No footsteps, no retreat. Just gone. I stood frozen until noon. Then the whispering came again. It wasn't the wind this time. It was closer. Inside, coming from under the floorboards. I dropped to my knees and listened. He broke the rule. He broke the rule. It chanted in a dozen voices, rising and falling like waves. I backed away slowly, right into the door, and a piece of paper fluttered from the ceiling. I caught it midair. It was the original rule sheet, but now there was a new line written in thick red ink. New rule. If you see her again, Don't look away. What? Why would it change? I turned slowly, feeling eyes on me. And outside the window, once again, stood the girl in the yellow raincoat. Only this time, she was inside the room. Part 4. The cabin won't let you leave. I didn't breathe. I didn't dare move. The girl in the yellow raincoat stood before me, her wet hair hanging in thin strands around her pale face. Her smile was impossibly wide. It stretched too far, too unnatural. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I was frozen, rooted to the spot. Do not look away. The rule played in my mind like a broken record. Her eyes never left mine. They were empty, hollow, as though they were waiting for something I wasn't giving her. I forced my legs to move. My hand brushed against the cold wall as I backed away. But it wasn't enough. The room seemed to shrink with every step. The walls inched closer. The ceiling lowered. And she didn't move. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I glanced at the door, but before I could reach it, the room shifted, the walls folding inward like they were alive. The windows, too, warped. The outside world now nothing but a distorted blur of motion. I turned back to the girl. The wide grin never faltered. She stepped forward slowly, each step echoing in the silence. I'm not a child, she whispered, her voice like ice. But you are, and you'll never leave. My heart pounded in my chest. I bolted for the door, my fingers fumbling on the doorknob. My breath came in sharp gasps. But when I turned it, nothing happened. I twisted harder. Nothing. I yanked at it desperately. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the girl's voice grew louder, closer. You broke the rules. You can't leave. I felt it then, the suffocating presence, a weight pressing down on me. The walls were closing in. My skin crawled. The air grew heavier. There was no way out. There was no escape. Then, just as I was about to lose my mind, the phone rang again. The same phone that hadn't worked since I got here. I grabbed it, praying for some kind of salvation, some connection to the outside world. The receiver crackled in my ear. You're going to die in this cabin. There is no way out. A voice whispered. It was the same voice that had called me when I first arrived. But now it was different, cold, final. I slammed the phone down. I was alone. I looked around the room, trying to think. The girl was still there, staring at me, but she didn't move. She didn't speak. Then the rules flashed through my mind again. The old ones, the new ones. Rule number 5, if the walls start to shift, stay still. Do not move. I dropped to the ground, not daring to blink. The floor groaned beneath me, as if it too was trying to escape. The girl was gone, just like that. But I knew she would be back. And next time, I wouldn't be so lucky. Part 5, the sound of screaming. I don't know how long I was on the floor. The walls still shifted, but now there was a rhythm to it. A pulsing beat that felt like a countdown. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of wet wood and something darker, something I couldn't quite place. I had to think fast. Rule number 6, never close your eyes when you hear screaming. I should have known better than to even think of resting, of closing my eyes. But the exhaustion was creeping in, dragging at my limbs, weighing me down. Every part of me screamed to rest, to give up, but I couldn't. The screaming, it had started again, At first it was soft, like a distant echo, but it grew louder, clearer. The walls seemed to hum with the sound, vibrating with a sickening intensity. It wasn't just one voice. No, it was hundreds, thousands. It was as if the very walls themselves were screaming, begging for release. I pulled myself to my feet, the floor trembling under me, as if the cabin itself was alive, as if it were listening to the screaming, answering it. "Don't listen," the girl's voice, distant, but somehow too close, echoed in my ears. "You're not supposed to hear it. You can't." I slammed my hands to my ears, but the sound was there. It filled my mind, clawing its way in. The shrill, agonizing shrieks that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The girl appeared again, standing at the far end of the room. She was no longer smiling. Her expression was empty, hollow. Her eyes were black, voids that seemed to suck in the very light around her. "You didn't follow the rule," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice joining the chorus of screams that filled the room. "Now, you have to stay forever." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Rule number 7, if the screams start to distort, find the source. 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 The walls trembled. The ceiling groaned. The floor beneath my feet cracked. But there, in the corner of the room, a small hole had appeared in the wall, barely noticeable. It was dark. Too dark. It looked like a place where the very shadows lived. I staggered toward it, trying not to listen to the screams, trying not to look at the girl, who was now standing closer than ever. Find the source. I took a deep breath and crawled toward the hole. My fingers brushed against something cold, slick and wet. I reached in and pulled at whatever I could, my heart pounding louder than the screams. And then I found it. A black, rotting hand. A hand that didn't belong. It grabbed mine, cold and clammy, pulling me toward the hole. It wasn't just a hand. It was attached to something. Something that felt wrong. Unnatural. The grip tightened around my wrist, and I could feel the skin burning, like it was being eaten away by the very darkness of the sea. I pulled back, yanking my arm free, but the hand held on, its fingers digging deeper into my flesh. And then I heard it, a voice, deep and guttural, like the very earth was speaking. "You're not leaving." With a final, desperate scream, I yanked my arm free and stumbled back, my breath coming in gasps. The hole in the wall closed up as if it had never been there, and the screams, they stopped. Suddenly, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The girl, the one who had been haunting me, was gone again. But I knew she wasn't gone for good. She would be back, just like everything else in this cabin. The only thing I could hear now was my heartbeat. And then, the phone rang again. I grabbed it, my hands shaking as I lifted it to my ear. "You've made it this far, but the next rule is the one that matters the most. Break it, and you'll never leave." I swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat form on my brow. "What is the next rule?" I whispered. The voice on the other end was silent for a long time before it spoke again. "If you hear the scream a third time, don't run." The line went dead. Part 6. The third scream. I couldn't breathe. The words from the phone still echoed in my head. "If you hear the scream a third time, don't run." But how could I not run? My body was shaking uncontrollably, my heart slamming in my chest. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to escape, to do anything but stay here. The cabin was no longer a shelter. It had become a cage. I stood in the center of the room, trying to steady myself, the air thick with an unspoken threat. The silence pressed in, suffocating, as if waiting for something, waiting for the third scream. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a sickening thud. I couldn't keep my grip on it any longer. My legs gave way beneath me, and I crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. The sound of my own breath was the only thing I could focus on, until it happened. The first scream. It was distant at first, a faint cry. It felt like it came from a long way off, like a whisper in the wind. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I had heard it before, that horrible, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. The scream was clearer now, rising in pitch, swelling with terror. It was a woman's scream, a scream filled with pain and fear. I felt it, deep in my bones. And then I realized it was coming from the same direction as the hole in the wall. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking with every step as I moved toward the far corner of the room. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The walls seemed to bend in on themselves, like they were closing in, squeezing the life out of the cabin. I reached the spot where the hole had been, but it was gone now, just a smooth, unbroken surface of wood. I reached out to touch it, my fingers brushing against the cold, slick wood. But I didn't feel the hole, the hand. Nothing. Where is it? I whispered to the walls. And then, as if the cabin itself was responding, I heard it again. The second scream. This one was louder, closer. A cry of agony that made my blood run cold. It tore through the air like a blade, and I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my throat. I could hear it so clearly now, the unmistakable sound of someone, something, in unimaginable pain. It was coming from the opposite side of the cabin. I turned, my head spinning, my pulse racing. I couldn't tell what was happening. It felt as if the entire cabin was alive, its walls breathing, shifting, wrapping me in a suffocating embrace. Don't listen. The girl's voice was back, a soft whisper at the back of my mind. You've broken the rules. You have to stay. I shook my head, pushing her voice out of my thoughts, focusing only on the screams. The second one was nearly unbearable, shrill and desperate, a cry for help that twisted my gut. Then, something shifted. The screams stopped. Dead silence. The air was still. For a moment, I thought maybe I had gone deaf, or worse, maybe I had gone mad. But then I heard it, the third scream. It was different from the others. This one wasn't a cry for help or a scream of pain. It was laughter. Not just any laughter, but a low, guttural laugh that came from deep within the very walls. The sound seemed to vibrate the ground beneath me, reverberating through my bones. It was mocking, cruel, and it felt wrong. It didn't come from any human mouth. It came from the dark corners of the cabin, from the shadows that no one could escape. The sound of something ancient, something malevolent, and it was close. Don't run, the voice on the phone had said. But that laughter was too much. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay and let whatever it was come closer. I turned. I ran. Part 7. The Shadow in the Cabin. I couldn't see where I was running. I could barely even hear the sound of my own feet hitting the floor over the pounding of my heart. My mind screamed at me to escape, to leave the cabin behind and never look back. But the laughter. Oh, the laughter. It was everywhere. It wasn't coming from any one place. It was coming from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. It was like the very cabin was alive, mocking me, playing with me. The oppressive weight of it pressed down on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. The rules. I had to remember the rules. I couldn't break them. But the fear, the terror, the way that laughter reverberated through my bones, it was all consuming. I stopped running, my back pressed against one of the cabin's walls. I gasped for air, my lungs burning. I had to think, to make sense of everything, but nothing made sense anymore. Stay calm, I whispered to myself, trying to push through the panic. You have to think, follow the rules. You can survive this. The rules. The first rule. Don't let the scream repeat. It was still echoing in the cabin, but I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I had failed. I had already broken the rule. You have to stay inside. That voice again. That girl's voice. You have to stay inside, or it will get you. I felt my heart skip a beat. She had never mentioned what it was. I could feel it now, pressing closer to me, like something out of my worst nightmare. Something was moving in the darkness. I could see a shape shifting within the shadows. It was slow at first, just a ripple, like a dark silhouette pressing itself against the walls. But then, it moved. The shadow darted toward me with an inhuman speed. I didn't have time to react. I felt something grab my ankle, pulling me backwards. My body slammed against the floor, the cold wood biting into my skin. I screamed, my hands scrambling for anything to hold on to. I reached for the walls, but they were slick and uneven, like the very surfaces were alive, pushing against me. Something brushed across my face, cold and wet. It was a hand. No, fingers, thin and long, with nails like jagged pieces of glass. I twisted, pulling away from the grip, but it was too strong. I kicked and clawed, trying to free myself, but my body was too weak, too tired. The laughing was louder now, so close I could feel the vibrations in my chest. Then I saw it. The figure in the shadows. It wasn't human, at least not in any way I understood. The face was featureless, just a void of blackness where eyes should be. A shape that couldn't be explained by anything I knew. It was monstrous. It was long-limbed and stretched, its body writhing in unnatural ways, like it was a creature made of shadows and smoke, coming alive from the very dark corners of the cabin. I could feel its cold breath against my neck as it loomed over me, its body pressing into mine. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body wouldn't obey me. Suddenly, the phone rang again. "Pick up the phone," the girl's voice commanded. "You must pick up the phone." The phone was on the floor next to me, its dim light flashing like a warning. I reached out, my hand shaking, but I couldn't touch it. My fingers wouldn't move. "Pick up the phone!" I had no choice. I had to listen to her. Slowly, painfully, I reached out, and my fingers brushed against the phone. The moment I touched it, the shadow hissed, retreating slightly, as if it knew what was coming. I lifted the phone to my ear, my heart pounding in my chest. What? What do you want me to do? I gasped, my voice trembling. The girl's voice was calm, eerily calm, as she spoke. You must answer the phone upon the third ring. Do not hesitate. The moment you hesitate, it will be over. The shadow lunged forward again, but this time I was ready. I clenched the phone tighter, and the moment the third ring sounded, I pressed the phone tightly against my ear. The rules, she whispered. You have broken the first, but there is still a chance. The final rule, do not listen to the laughter. The shadow's laugh grew louder, almost deafening now, but the girl's voice was a steady anchor in the chaos. Don't listen. Don't let it consume you. Answer the phone and follow the rules. Only then can you survive. Part 8. The third rule. I could feel the laughter creeping under my skin, a cold sensation that sank deep into my bones. The phone pressed to my ear was the only thing grounding me, its sharp, metallic ring reverberating through my skull. The girl's voice was clearer now, her words echoing in my mind. Don't listen to the laughter. Her voice was urgent, but calm, like she had said this many times before. I had no idea what she meant. The laughter was all around me, a twisting, shrieking sound that seemed to come from every direction. It was inside the walls, the floor, the very air I breathed. I couldn't escape it. Every laugh twisted and distorted until it was no longer human, no longer sane. I glanced around, my eyes wide, heart pounding. The shadow had retreated for now, but I could still feel its presence in the room, a dark cloud hanging over me. Its laughter was gone, but the air was thick with its absence, a silent terror pressing in on me. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice cracking. How do I stop it? The girl's voice responded, clearer than before. You must not listen. Ignore the laughter, or it will take you. I took a shaky breath and focused on the phone in my hand. The rules. I had to follow them. I had already broken one, but I wasn't going to break another. The shadow in the room was real, but it wasn't the real threat. The laughter was. I had to resist it. I had to ignore it. I squeezed my eyes shut, blocking out the sound. I forced my mind to focus on the girl's voice, her calm, measured words. Ignore the laughter. Focus on the rules. You must stay strong. For a moment, the laughter faded, but just as quickly, it returned, louder, more insistent. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the shadows flickered, shifting. They weren't just shadows. They were alive. They moved. They wanted to consume me. I shook my head, trying to push the panic away. No, I won't listen. I won't give in. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood, trembling. I had to act quickly. The rules had to be followed. There was no time for hesitation. I turned toward the door, the only exit, the only way out. But as I moved, the shadow shifted with me, staying close, almost as if it were watching my every move. Then the phone rang again, the third ring. Answer it, the girl's voice urged. Answer it now, and the laughter will stop. You must keep it away. Answer it. The shadow lunged toward me once again, but this time, I was ready. I dropped to my knees, reaching for the phone, desperate to grab it before it was too late. My fingers brushed the edge of the receiver, and I yanked it up to my ear. Yes, I gasped, barely able to speak. The girl's voice was louder, more urgent now. You have broken 2 rules. You must now survive the final test. The laughter cannot be ignored any longer. It has found you. My eyes went wide with realization. What do I do? Answer the third question correctly, and you will live, she whispered. Answer it wrong, and the darkness will consume you. A chill ran down my spine as the laughter grew louder, more insistent. The shadows closed in around me, pressing against my skin, making it harder to breathe. What's the question? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. What is it that you fear most? The room went silent. I froze, unable to speak, my mind racing. Fear. I had always feared the unknown, the things that lurked in the dark corners of my mind. But this thing was different. It was real. It was a nightmare made flesh, and it was here, closing in on me. The question echoed in my mind. What is it that you fear most? I thought back to the rules. I thought back to the warning the girl had given me. The laughter, I whispered. I fear the laughter, the sound of it, the way it eats away at me. Then you must face it, the girl replied softly. You must face your fear, or you will never escape. The phone went silent. For a moment, the laughter stopped. The shadow in the room shifted, then faded, as if it were waiting for something. The walls were silent, the air still. It was like I was suspended in time, waiting for the next step. And then I understood. I didn't have to fight the laughter. I had to confront it. I stood tall, feeling the weight of the cabin around me. The shadows were no longer my enemy. They were the reflection of my fear, the fear I had to face in order to survive. I will face it, I whispered to myself. I took one last breath before I stepped forward, ready to confront whatever lay in the darkness. Part 9. The final question. The room was silent, the oppressive darkness wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. The laughter had stopped, only for a moment, but it was the quiet before the storm. I stood there, still holding the phone, waiting for the girl's voice to guide me through what came next. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had made it out. But deep down, I knew better. The darkness wasn't done with me yet. It was waiting, lurking, watching. And I had one final question to answer. What is it that you fear most? The question echoed in my mind. I had answered once, but now it felt different. There was a weight to it, something heavier, more sinister. I wasn't just facing the shadows in the room anymore. I was confronting my very soul. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to silence the growing panic in my chest. What was it that I feared? The darkness? The laughter? The creature in the shadows? No, it was deeper than that. It was the fear of being consumed by it all, of losing myself to whatever force haunted this cursed cabin. I opened my eyes, meeting the darkness head on. I wasn't going to let it win. Not now. Not after everything I had survived. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again, breaking my thoughts. The girl's voice was softer this time, a faint whisper that cut through the silence like a blade. The final question is this, she said, her voice trembling with urgency. What will you do when the darkness speaks to you? Will you run, or will you stay and face it? I froze. The question didn't make sense. How could I face the darkness when it was everywhere? When it had already consumed everything around me? But then I realized, the darkness wasn't just something outside of me. It was inside me, too. It had been there all along. It was my fear, my doubt, my guilt, the things I had buried deep inside, the parts of myself I had never wanted to confront. The darkness had been feeding on those feelings, growing stronger with each passing moment. I had to confront it. I had to face the fear that had been hiding within me all this time. Only then could I escape. I clenched the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. The shadows pressed closer, the temperature dropping with each breath I took. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak. "I will stay," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "I will face it. I will not run." The room seemed to hold its breath as I spoke those words. The darkness, the shadows, the laughter, it all seemed to pause. And for a moment, it felt like everything was still, as if the very air had stopped moving. Then, the girl's voice came again, softer now, but filled with something I hadn't heard before. Relief. "You have made the right choice. The darkness cannot touch you anymore. The rules are broken, but you are free." I didn't know what that meant. What did she mean by free? The shadows were still there, lurking in the corners of the room, but they no longer seemed as threatening. It was as though they were retreating, fading away, unable to reach me anymore. The phone clicked softly in my ear, and the line went dead. I stood there, heart racing, unsure of what had just happened. Had I won? Had I really escaped? And then I heard it. A faint sound, barely a whisper, as if the very walls of the cabin were trying to speak to me. "You're not done yet." I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the same empty room. The shadows were gone. The laughter was gone. The air was still, but there was something new now. A chill that ran down my spine. I stepped forward, unsure of what was next. What did the girl mean by, "You're not done yet"? Was this some kind of trick? Or had I truly escaped the darkness? I didn't know the answer, but one thing was clear. The nightmare wasn't over. The rules had been broken, but the game had changed. And now, it was up to me to survive the aftermath. Part 10. The Final Escape. The silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the entire cabin had been holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The air was thick with tension, and the oppressive weight of it was almost unbearable. I glanced around, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The shadows were gone, but the chill in the air remained, a constant reminder that I hadn't truly escaped. Not yet. I took one cautious step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The floor creaked under my weight, the sound too loud in the stillness of the room. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct told me to run, to get out of the cabin as quickly as possible. But something held me in place. Something was waiting for me. I could feel it. Then, the whisper came again. The same voice, distant but clear, cutting through the silence. "You're not free yet." I froze, the words sending a chill down my spine. This wasn't over. No, it wasn't even close to being over. But I didn't know what I had to do to end this nightmare. Was I trapped here forever? Was I going to be forced to relive this horror for the rest of my life? I looked down at the phone in my hand. It was still glowing, still alive. But there were no more messages, no more instructions. Was it really finished? Had I passed the final test? The question lingered in my mind. A question I couldn't shake. And that's when I heard it. The faintest of sounds. A soft scraping, like something dragging across the floor. I turned toward the source of the sound. It was coming from the corner of the room. The very same corner where the darkness had once gathered. Where the shadows had been the thickest. My breath caught in my throat as I saw it. A figure, standing just outside the light's reach. A shape that was all too familiar, yet completely alien. The tall, thin silhouette of a man, or something pretending to be a man. Its face was obscured, shrouded in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me. And those eyes, they were full of hunger. Without thinking, I took a step back. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting. I could feel its gaze like a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The phone in my hand buzzed again. I almost dropped it in shock, but I caught it just in time. A new message appeared on the screen. One final rule. The message sent a jolt of terror through me. The rules were never supposed to end. They were a never-ending cycle, a game I couldn't escape from. But this final rule, it had to be different. This time, there would be no more tests, no more games. I read the message, my heart racing with each word. To survive, you must never look away. The figure in the corner of the room stirred. It stepped closer, inch by inch, its movement jerky and unnatural. I could hear its breath, ragged and wet, like something living in the shadows. I knew it was coming for me, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't break the rule. I took a deep breath and stood my ground, forcing myself to keep my gaze locked on the figure. No matter how much my body screamed at me to run, the air grew colder, the shadows stretching longer. But I didn't move. I didn't dare to blink, to break the connection. For what felt like an eternity, the figure and I stood there, locked in this silent battle. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure stopped moving. It froze in place, its form beginning to flicker, like a bad signal on a TV. The shadows recoiled, retreating into the corners of the room. The darkness that had filled every inch of this cabin began to dissipate, as if the figure itself was holding it back. I didn't dare to take my eyes off it. The moment I did, I knew I would be lost forever. The figure began to vanish, its form melting away like mist in the sunlight. I stood there, trembling, my heart in my throat, until there was nothing left but the soft hum of the phone in my hand. The rules had been broken. The game was over. And yet, a part of me wasn't sure if I had truly escaped. The silence, the stillness, it was too perfect, too complete. I finally allowed myself to breathe, my legs giving way as I sank to the floor. My chest heaved with each labored breath. It was over. I had survived. Somehow, I had survived. But as I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I wasn't alone in this cabin. And maybe, just maybe, I never had be. Psst, thank you for staying till the end. If your heart's still beating, maybe it's time to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be waiting here every week with a new nightmare just for you. Remember, in the silence, something always listens back.